Viewers, thank you for joining us. You are watching our weekly program, Talk to OBN, on your favorite media channel, OBN Horn of Africa. In this edition, we'll be discussing about violent extremism in the Horn of Africa, and IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism is laboriously working to combat terrorism and violent extremism in the Eastern Horn of Africa. Martha Njiiri is head of strategic communication for IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. Martha, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Addis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, to begin with, would you provide us an overview of the IGAD Center of Excellence mandate and primary areas of focus when it comes to preventing violent extremism in the Eastern and Horn of Africa?
Thank you, Addis. The IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, the acronym ICEP-CVE, was established to promote sharing of best practices and lessons learned in preventing and countering violent extremism in East and Horn of Africa, and additionally to bring together the state and non-state actors involved in PCV work, that is the Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism in East and Horn of Africa, to ensure an inclusive and holistic approach, meaning that we are very much on the forefront of making sure that all the state and non-state actors who have been on the forefront in preventing and countering violent extremism to sit together to discuss on the way forward and to be able to share how they have been able to do this effectively and efficiently in their member states. So primarily, that is the work and that is the mandate that the IGAD Center of Excellence is mandated to do, to share, to promote sharing of experiences and of best practices in PCVE work.
Dr. Martha, what are the key programs or initiatives carried out by your center so far?
Thank you very much, Addis. I would want to begin by saying that we have been guided by the IGAD Regional Strategy of Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, under which the center has been mandated to implement it in the region and in the member states that we operate in. And therefore, we have been able also to cascade down to our member states these PCV strategy, with some member states having in place and having developed specific strategies that inform preventing and countering of violent extremism. And we've had very good instances where we have like Somalia, we have Uganda, we have Kenya already has a PCV strategy in place, who have borrowed from the IGAD regional strategy on PCVE and developed their own national strategies. We also had a very successful case with Djibouti, who also in 2021 had their PCV strategy in place, informed by the IGAD regional PCV strategy. And we are closely working with the other member states that don't have the PCV strategy in place, so that then they can also have that starting point of having this very integral regional strategy. More so, we have been able to work with the member states, ensuring that all the state and non-state actors have been coming together to be given practical tools on how to prevent and counter violent extremism, with our focus being on soft approaches. We call them soft approaches, or the preventative measures, where they are able then to integrate these and fight the issues of radicalization and recruitment into violent extremism and these groups. Therefore, the work of the center being guided by the strategy, then to bring the state and non-state actors together, who I'm going to expand as we continue with the conversation to tell you exactly the groups that we have successfully worked with.
How does the center work with, member states and this civil society organizations and NGOs and other stakeholders?
Thank you, Addis. We focus on 4 key strategic areas, and one of these is research. We closely work with researchers and research institutions so that we are able to gain new knowledge, new information, and to be able to adapt localized approaches to prevent and counter violent extremism. So in that breadth, research is one key strategic area that we focus on. The other area is on training, where we equip the state and non-state actors with tools that they can be able to apply to prevent and counter violent extremism. States that we have been very as the states and non-state actors to be able to engage effectively in PCV training, being the second strategic area. That is on strategic communication, where we empower the state and non-state actors to be able to develop, to design, and to disseminate effective counter and alternative messages so that they are able to undermine the violent extremists' ideologies. So the third area would be the strategic communication. And lastly, on civil society engagement. This is another key strategic area that we work with both the non-state actors, specifically bringing together religious leaders, bringing together the youth and the civil society, bringing together the researchers and the media, so that then we can enhance their capacities on how they can be able to develop what we call alternative and counter narratives, which are basically to undermine these ideologies of violent extremists, which they use to radicalize and to recruit people into this group. So those are the 4 key areas: on research, on training, communication, and on civil society engagement.
Dr. Martha, your center is doing an amazing tasks in combating and countering violent extremism in the Horn of Africa. This has been, well said by other stakeholders for your commitment and dedications in that area. But what are the bottleneck and challenges seen in the areas of undertaking this major initiatives?
Thank you, Addis, once again. Let me start by saying that violent extremism has not been a priority seen as some member states see. So this has also brought issues of no major contributions towards this area of violent extremism. And therefore, I would say one of the major challenges that we have experienced is lack of this prioritizing of the soft approaches to counter violent extremism, which has ultimately led to not rather major contributions towards this area. I would also maybe say the volatility of the region has also brought this issue of the prioritization, so that member states have seen, prioritizing on other areas as more key in terms of their peace and security, other than this area of violent extremism. Also getting information across the borders, seeing that violent extremism is a very sensitive issue is also a challenge. So the intelligence sharing sometimes across the borders also poses a very major challenge due to reluctance of the state actors that are involved in this area not being very comfortable sharing information across the borders. So I would narrow down to those key issues of the intelligence sharing across the borders, which sometimes affects how the PCV work, and also the lack of prioritization by member states because of volatility issues, which then they would want to prioritize other than prioritizing the issue of violent extremism.
Let's talk about monitoring and evaluation of your progress. How does the center monitor and evaluate the impact of preventing a violent extremism?
Thank you, Addis. I think the issue of monitoring and evaluation is one that is very critical, because this is where you're able to know, are you making impact on the ground? And we have had a very critical issues for us and as a center. So internally, we have been supported in the issue of monitoring and evaluation at the IGAD Secretariat level, where we are able to develop tools to monitor our progress internally. And also where we are having projects, we have been supported by our partners to be able to get external evaluators to be able to monitor and evaluate the progress that we are making in the PCV activities that we have been implementing. So we have a wealth of information with us on what we can do to improve and on emergent issues that we need to address on, which have been as a result of the monitoring and evaluation. And I'm happy to show that, recent evaluation that we have conducted, for instance, showing that it is very critical for us to continue the work of pushing for gender perspectives in preventing and countering violent extremism, and of including women in preventing and countering violent extremism who have been very marginalized, for instance. And the other emergent perspectives that we have seen is on the issue of addressing climate change issues, which also exacerbates and multiply the effects of youth joining violent extremism groups, and also the issues of emerging technologies and how they can be utilized in terms of preventing and countering violent extremism. So this can tell you how critical monitoring and evaluation has been for us, because we have been able to get these other perspectives that we need to integrate in our PCVE work.
Your center, oftentimes give training for professionals in this part of the region for member countries. Among others, you have given training in the areas of media for media practitioners. To mention one on best practices in reporting gender-sensitive issues. Another is best practices in reporting and preventing and violent extremism stories. Tell me about it. It's been undertaking in continuous manner for 2 years, I guess. Tell me about this initiative.
Thank you very much, Addis. I want to talk about the support that we have received from critical partners. The reason being the government of Sweden, who have been very generous with their support in terms of integrating gender in PCV work. And as you have rightfully mentioned, is that we have closely worked with the media in terms of reporting violent extremism incidences while integrating gender perspectives. And I would want to say that media is just among the many other actors that we have been able to work with to enhance their capacities. We also have had the youth and the civil society who have been supported under this program by the government of Sweden, as well as the state actors. So we want to look at the law enforcement officers, the investigators, prosecutors, judicial officers. We've had correctional officers, and we've also had researchers on board. So we have had an array of actors that have been supported in terms of integrating gender perspectives to ensure an inclusive and holistic approach in preventing and countering violent extremism. And I would want to say that in terms of implementing this project, for instance, among many others, we have been able to build up networks, media network that is able to support us in terms of coverage of violent extremism, a youth and civil society network that have been able to put efforts even down at the grassroots level on how to prevent and counter violent extremism, of state actors like in the correctional facilities who are pushing for inclusion of women perspectives in rehabilitation and reintegration. And therefore, you can see the issue of the PCV initiatives that we have been able to implement under the support by partners such as the government of Sweden. We also had the government of Denmark supporting us, the European Union, all have been supporting the Horn and East of Africa to be able to come together and integrate all these good practices in terms of preventing and countering violent extremism, which really should be a continuous effort, because violent extremism is not only an IGAD region only, but also falls down into other, even at the international level. And therefore, this is a journey that should be undertaken by all these partners, both at international, at national, and even at local level.
Well, this capacity building training given for professionals is very critical. But how successful have this efforts been, Doctor? Have you implemented any assessment on how successful it has been?
Yes, indeed. It has been quite successful, and we have been able to evaluate the impact. We have seen, for instance, a production of many stories across the region on how women are being involved, and both men and women and also children being either affected by this fight against violent extremism. And therefore, I can say that we are seeing impact, the small steps that different actors are taking. And also with the youth taking the lessons that they have learned also to their communities. We are seeing actors, state actors, for instance, taking these lessons that they have learned to their authorities to be able to implement at the institutional level. And therefore, I would say that we are experiencing impact, both the short term, and we can actually see the medium term impact. And we are hoping that these impact that we are seeing are going to be taken up in the long term, so that we can effectively contribute to our mandate, which is reducing the violent extremism threat in the Horn of Africa.
Who finances the ICEPCV's operation and activities? Of course, I have heard that you've mentioned government of Sudan. Can you enlighten us about how it rolls on? Is that one time ingest of finance, or it goes on?
Thank you, Hadis, for that. Let me start by first thanking the member states who have been critical. In as much the violent extremism may not be a priority, but then they have contributed both financially and in kind. And in as much these resources may not be sufficient, we thank the member states for the continued support. Secondly, I would want to thank our partners, and as you have rightly said, the government of Sweden, who have been in the last 2 years supporting the center, have also been very gracious in holding our hand, in addition to the member states' contribution that we have had. And they have actually been very critical, and they're continuing with this support. Under the Peace and Security Division, we are grateful to have this support ongoing, so that we are able to have a long-term impact. We have also had the government of Italy coming on board to especially support the law enforcement. And this is going to start off in this year. We also have had previous support from the European Union under what was called the IPSHA program, and also the government of Denmark, as well as the United States of America through their State Department, who are actually the initial actors who helped us to actualize the IGAD regional PCV strategy. So you can tell that we have had very wholesome support from both nationally, from our member states, and also the international partners who have seen the need to come together and work in the PCVE area, so that we are able to counter the violent extremism threat in the region.
What are the future directions and priorities, Doctor? Your center's future direction and priorities.
Yes, indeed. We want to continue with the inclusion of women, because this is an ongoing aspect. We just had the validation of the Women, Peace and Security at the IGAD region strategy in place. So we want to continue with the good work of inclusion of women, and also so that they are at the same level in terms of contributing towards the fight against violent extremism. We are also keen on emerging perspectives, climate change, how does it intersect and how does it contribute to the issue of countering violent extremism in the region. And also, as we talk about this, we really want to work closely with the youth and the civil society, who really have been very supportive and have been very active in their communities. And of course, looking at the media, who we classify under the civil society, a very critical actor. We want to continue working with the media because they are also on the forefront of countering and undermining the violent extremist ideologies, the misinformation, the disinformation that we see on the media spaces, which also brings me to the issue of the emerging technologies and how they have contributed in terms of violent extremism, in terms of radicalization through what I'm calling the misinformation and disinformation and all these ideologies that we are seeing on the online and offline spaces. So we are very keen in terms of advancing this conversation and working with critical actors. This is, as I've said, the youth, the media, the civil society, the religious leaders, so that we are able to come together and be able to undermine the violent extremist ideologies and effectively and holistically prevent and counter violent extremism in Horn and East of Africa.
You've, given training to media practitioners many times. What are the problems being seen in that area, mostly in this part of the region, in IGAD region, in reporting violent extremism?
One of the challenges that we, and this was from research that was conducted, was the depiction of doing the violent extremist act as being a men-only activity, which is not always the case. We have seen instances where women have also been involved. And the reason why it was very important then to start thinking of the media as how do they cover these stories. So bringing the media on board and to train them on covering professionally is to tell them we need to show the situation as it is, that both men and women can be perpetrators, that both men and women can be victims, that children, both young boys, young girls, can be involved in violent extremism. And therefore, because the media is a very critical actor, because once the media covers it and covers the holistically and includes all the actors in the story, then it is easy even for the policymakers to be able to take up these issues and then are implemented in the right. So we started from the point of having very skewed representations in the media space, which is why for us, empowering media practitioners becomes very critical for us, because it is able to empower the media practitioners to be able to cover professionally. That is why we have seen media as a very critical actor. And yes, we have now seen the story, the wholesome story being given, which has been a success for us. Also saying that the media understanding that the violent extremist ideologies, how they are being propagated, and they are the first to be able to raise the alarm that something is not right. We think and we have seen how critical building the media network has been for us. And also to say that the power that the media holds, if harnessed properly, then becomes very critical in matters pushing for peace and security, and specifically in preventing and countering violent extremism.
The good model that IGAD emphasized is best practices in reporting violent extremism. Can you enlighten us on those practices of reporting violent extremism when journalists do stories mostly?
Yes, indeed. It has to do with the language It has to do with the pictures that are used, with the interviews that are conducted, so that when the media wants to interview, then they are also thinking, are we having balanced representations of both men and women in terms of expertise? When we are doing the stories, are we having pictures that are graphic? What kind of picture should we have in the media space? Again, what is the kind of language are we using? Is it gender sensitive? Is it language that is going to bring people together? Is it a message, or the message and the language used? Is it the one that is going to provoke feelings of hatred, feelings of a lack of passions, and so on? So for us, it is more of how do you include the interviewees? What are the images? What are the graphics that you use? And how do you depict the victims in the story? So these are some of the issues that we find very critical in terms of the journalists adapting and incorporating in their story, so that then they are able to have professionally reported stories.
People use extreme violent and violent extremism interchangeably. Will you share your thoughts in this area?
Thank you very much, Addis. Yeah, of course, when we talk and when you're talking of violent extremism, it has to do with the ideologies that is used to incite hate, violence, and this kind of thing. When we look at extreme violence, of course, it is violence that you met, conflict that you met on people, or that you that is meted on communities for whatever reasons they may be fighting for. It may be for resource-based, it may be because of whatever they are fighting for, water points, and so on. So violent extremism, from our perspective, has to do with ideologies that are used to propagate violence. That is how we define, and this is what we are pushing for, to counter any ideologies that promote conflict, either be it political, be it economic, be it for social reasons, among others.
Perfect. Dr. Martha, before you leave, finally, if you have any remark, the floor is yours. Maybe a remark, a message to staff, member states, donors, stakeholders. Go ahead.
Violent extremism is a fight that is for everybody. It is not for IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. We should come together at international, at regional, at national, at local levels. We should come together and have inclusive, holistic approaches that are going to help us prevent and counter violent extremism in a way that reduces this threat in the region and beyond. It is a call for everybody in their own capacity to feel the need to come together and to feel the need to be involved in this very critical fight that seeks to have peace, security, and stability in the region and beyond.
Dr. Martha Njiiri, Head of Strategic Communication, IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. Thank you indeed, and I really appreciate on behalf of OBN Horn of Africa for your invaluable insight, Dr. Martha.
Thank you very much, Addis. It was a pleasure to be hosted by you.
Thank you. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. This brings us to the end of our edition for today. See you next time with another edition. Bye-bye.